Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's joint hearing on the proposed 2020 operating budget for the Administration, Environment, and Economic Development Committees. Please be aware that this hearing is being recorded for rebroadcast on CTV Government Channel 3. The rebroadcast schedule is available at www.columbus.gov. I'd like to first start off by welcoming my colleague, Councilmember Shayla Faber. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I have to start out by saying that it's been both a joy and an honor to chair these committees. The constant commitment and hard work displayed by leadership and workforce within these committees has been nothing short of impressive. As we prepare for 2020 and close out 2019, it is important to acknowledge and thank all City of Columbus employees for their hard work and dedication throughout this past year. I also want to thank and recognize our presenters this evening, Director Nicole Brandon, Department of Human Resources, Director Amy DeLong, the Civil Service Commission, Assistant Director Jeff Ortega, Department of Public Utilities, Assistant Director Steve Wenzel, the Department of Public Service, Rosalie Hendon, Department of Recreation and Parks, Interim Director Michael Stevens, the Department of Economic Development. We will begin this evening with a presentation from the Administration Committee, which includes the Department of Human Resources and the Civil Service Commission. We'll start out with Director Brandon. Director Brandon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Remy and Councilmember Faber. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an overview of the 2020 General Fund and Employee Benefits Fund budgets for the Department of Human Resources. The 2020 General Fund budget is $3,122,816. This reflects a 4.4% increase over the 2019 General Fund budget. The Employee Benefits Fund is budgeted at $5,808,836, and this reflects a 16% increase over the 2019 budget. The General Fund portion of the budget supports 14 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. The 2020 Employee Benefits Fund budget supports 30 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. The 2020 budget includes funding that will allow us to increase our staffing by 2 full-time employees to support efforts in the Benefits and Wellness section and the Employee Resources sections of the department. In addition to this, the funding will also allow our office to increase the Employee Benefits Consultant contract due to a broader and more inclusive level of responsibility. It is also necessary to increase the collective bargaining consultant contract due to enhanced consultant responsibilities in 2020, including revising and updating the city's strike contingency plan for non-uniformed employees, as well as leading 6 sets of negotiations for contracts set to expire in 2020. It will allow us to absorb the cost of both medical and pharmacy audits, as pre, post, and periodic audits of the contracts are considered an industry best practice. The vendor will reimburse the fund for the cost of the audits, but initial funding is required in order to establish the contracts. We will also be in a position to increase training and development, as well as continue funding for the workers' compensation fraud investigations. This really concludes the budget for 2020. Those are the items that will be enhanced and increased based on the additional funds. And we do thank you for your support of the Department of Human Resources. And I'd also like to thank Mayor Ginther and the Department of Finance for their support and guidance through this process. That does include the presentation, unless you have any questions for me.
Just we're coming up into some contract negotiations this next year, of course, and then our employee benefits contract is going to be, we're going to go out to bid on that, correct? The
contracts for our medical and pharmacy, those bids have already gone out, and right, the contracts will go into effect February 1st of 2020.
I just wanted you to speak a little bit about your staff. It's kind of quite remarkable, I think, maybe the limited number of staff that actually work on that, but you've got some great staff that hold that all together for our entire employee workforce. And I think it's quite surprising how small a staff it is, but they do a great job, and I just wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on that. We do have a new employee benefits and wellness manager who came to us with a wealth of knowledge from the county. We were very fortunate to bring on Sonia Burley as the manager. And we also have a fairly new trust fund coordinator. She came to us from PERS and also brought a wealth of knowledge. Both of them together have been able to really add to the staff that we had and to the knowledge base that we had. As you mentioned, we have Sonia, and then there are 3 full-time staff members that currently support the benefits and wellness section, in addition to staffing in our Healthy Columbus section. So what we're able to do with the 2020 budget is to add an additional analyst that will assist us as we manage the plan designs for the multiple contracts. And then, as you know, with IAFF, we have both the PPO plan and a high deductible health plan with an HSA. So, we have some additional work that we'll be doing, but we want to enhance the support to the employees. We want to provide the best options for the employees. And so I think this budget allows us to do that by adding staff to help us deliver.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Sure. Councilmember Favor.
Thank you, Director Brandon, for your presentation. Just a question around the collective bargaining negotiations and that 14% increase. Is that customary to outsource resources that would help the city in negotiating those new contracts?
I just want to be clear, you're referencing the increase to the consultant contract? Yes, I would say that 3 years ago, when we were entering into contracts and had 6 bargaining units, all of them expiring at the same time, we actually increased the contract by $150,000.
Okay.
That allowed the consultant to really dive into the benefits portion of the contract, the insurance section of the contracts, and it was a really, really heavy lift. We were successful. I think we made some really significant strides. With this round of negotiations, we're only asking to increase it by $75,000.
Okay.
So not as much, because we don't see the need to go that deep into certain sections of the contract. However, because we are also working on the strike contingency plan, in addition to negotiating, we do think it's sufficient to increase it by this amount. Not quite as much as we did before, but we do think that we'll need to have some additional funds for the additional resources necessary in order to create the strike plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Director Brandon. Appreciate your testimony this evening. And so now we will move on to Director DeLong with the Civil Service Commission. Director DeLong, this floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Ramey, Councilmember Favor. As you know, the Civil Service Commission is a part of the checks and balances of city government and is responsible for maintaining a merit system of employment to ensure that the city employment is accessible and filled with qualified, competent individuals. To that end, the Commission's budget request for 2020 is $4,427,504. This reflects a 2% decrease from our 2019 appropriation, and this decrease is a result of not administering the entry-level firefighter test, which is administered every other year. Just to kind of update the overall expenses and how we kind of lay them out in my department, the non-uniform testing staff, which is all testing outside of our safety testing, has 7 full-time individuals, and it's a budget of $654,300. Our uniform testing has 9 full-time and 12 part-time for $1,205,500. This year, they will be administering the police officer, police lieutenant, police commander, fire battalion chief, and the fire deputy chief promotional tests. Applicant Employment Services is 9 individuals. They are $809,100. And the administration and other expenses for my office, which includes a $2,000 grant for what was the Restoration Academy, now the EDGE program, which I'll tell you more about in 2020, is $1,740,000. Some of our special projects that Civil Service will be working to accomplish this year is year-round testing for portions of the police and fire tests to give more opportunities. Outside of our regular testing process, we're going to pilot test a test preparedness project with utilities and Columbus City Schools to prepare students who will be interested in working in city government for positions like EO2s, which is our entry level into our water department. It's really a high math skilled position that is usually our non-degree position, but it's a difficulty, and that test is important because we need individuals who can then pass the EPA test, which is required of that to move up into that next position. So this is a trainee position. So we're hoping to work with them to maybe accomplish some trainee levels in that area. And then outside of that, we have our New Americas project, which we are teaming up with City Council to help our New Americas gain a better understanding of the civil service process and provide testing and workforce development training through local service agencies. Just a little prep, the grant applications are being accepted through this Friday, so hopefully you guys will get a ton of those because we're really excited about working with you to do that. And with the adoption of this requested budget, the commission will have a total of 36 full-time, 12 part-time regular positions to carry out the classification and application assessment responsibilities. And with that, I'd like to thank my staff, Mayor Ginther, especially Josh Hoppings from the Finance Department with their assistance in helping us prepare our 2020 budget. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those at this time.
Definitely want to thank you for your work, especially partnering with us on the New American Initiative. Do want to ask how Mike's doing. Is he back to work yet or not yet? And
Not yet. Not yet.
So we're all rooting and praying for him, but certainly appreciate all the work that your staff does and keeping us fully staffed as a city. And so we'll continue to work on projects that help to diversify our workforce to make it look much more like the community that we serve. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much.
Next, we will move on to the Environment Committee. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to ask my colleague, Councilmember Faber. She has a question.
Forgot all about me. Thank you for your presentation. So it is noted in the budget that Civil Service will continue to review and update selection processes for hiring employees. Can you speak specifically to how you all are going to make sure through the hiring process that it's more efficient to attract and retain the most talented applicants here?
Absolutely. One of the things in our budget this year is a $70,000 software budget that we haven't not. We've been trying to find the correct software for the last 3 years. That's a software that's going to allow us to look at each question individually. It'll allow us to assess adverse impact by question and not by test. Okay. It's also going to allow us to have a question banking software that we're able to have better access in picking questions, deleting questions, doing that kind of stuff, which is, I think, going to give us a quicker turnaround with development of tests because we'll be able to bank those questions and reutilize the ones that are appropriate. In addition to that, some of the things that we're doing in the testing process right now is, for example, this year, we hope to start with the multiple choice section of our police and fire testing. It's a hurdle, it's not a scored part of our exam. What we hope to do with that is a part of our rules allows testing every 6 months. So for example, for fire, which we only test every 2 years, if someone takes that portion and passes it, when the actual time for application comes, they may only be here for 1 day versus maybe 2 or 3 days of testing.
Okay.
So that, we hope, speeds up the process. We also hope that it gives people a chance to see parts of the test and have an opportunity to take it again before the application actually is open for the official test, which we hope then shortens the time that it takes us, because for those tests we have sometimes in police around 1,500 people that actually come and show up to take the test, and for our fire test we have around 2,300 people that we're testing at one time. So we're hoping that limits the amount that we're testing during the actual open process, because we will roll that right over into that test. Okay. So lots of things this year in hopes to do that. With piloting with the New Americas, we're hoping that we can do some of those types of things. One other thing I think is really exciting this year is with our 911 call taker. We actually offered the test, the key keyboarding portion of the test to every applicant before they even showed up to take it. So we actually emailed that to them as a part of their come take the test, and gave them actually practice test and that test, so they knew up front if they needed more work on keyboarding before they showed up, or, wow, I did really well, I'm going to go take the rest of that test. It was a pilot. It didn't get as many people interested in it, but I think the more we do those kinds of things and give more people confidence in the testing process, the faster testing will go and the more people that will actually show up and improve our rates for testing.
Okay, wonderful. And I love the idea, the pilot idea. I think it's something we should absolutely try again. And to that effort, can you discuss a little bit about just our outreach efforts to make sure we are doing our best to make sure folks are aware of any open positions, or if that's a gap that we need to try to strategize to fill?
With civil service, we work with all the agencies as we test positions. It's really a lot on the agencies because they have the expertise about where to find those individuals. Some of the things we're doing about making testing and civil service understandable to people is we actually last year took one of our analysts and put her in a liaison position, and she goes out to various community events. She goes out to some of our commission meetings outside of the departments. I'm trying to think what they're called. Area commission meetings, and talks to people outside in that capacity. She also does testing clinics, which we just made a video with CTV that will actually have all of that testing on our website, so people who may not be able to get out will also be able to see just that it's not intimidating.
Right.
So I think that's going to be helpful as well.
Is that what you're hoping to achieve through the training program that's in partnership with Columbus City Schools?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And I hope to do some of the pilot testing right at Columbus City Schools and then some of the real testing. We're really excited if we can get out to the communities and we can get environments where we can have valid tests. And so when we give a test, we want it to be in an equally situated environment so everybody has the same opportunity. And yes, we're hoping that Columbus City Schools, we can go out and talk about those parts that we need, and then Columbus City Schools, I think, is going to do some of the training before the test even occurs.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I do have one more question for you, Director. If someone is interested in employment with the City of Columbus, where do they go? And likewise, if they have questions about the Civil Service Commission and the processes that are involved with it, who do they call?
Yep. They can call 614-645-8303 or 8301, and both of those numbers go directly to Civil Service. In terms of our website, they can get on the columbus.gov and go into the Job Center tab and all of the information. I think one of the important things that people don't know is we have an opportunity for people to get on, fill out their profile, and actually select those jobs that they're interested in, and when they become open, they get an email. So they don't have to wait until an opening is actually on the site to apply.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now we'll move on to the Environment Committee, which includes the City of Columbus's Office of Sustainability and the Department of Public Service Division of Refuse. We will begin with Assistant Director Jeff Ortega. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Favor, members of City Council. Good evening. My name is Jeff Ortega, Assistant Director of the Department of Public Utilities and Sustainable Columbus, Coordinator for the City of Columbus. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk briefly about the Office of Sustainability's proposed budget for 2020. Very briefly, I'd like to highlight some of the office's work and the programs and initiatives that we will be undertaking in 2020. The funding for the office is approximately $890,000, which represents personnel expenditures, supplies, and services. The office has 5 full-time staff, which is comprised of an assistant director of sustainability, a green spot coordinator, and 3 members of our public outreach team. Breakdown of supplies and services include dollars for our green spot community backyards conservation program, as well as our green spot materials. Our supplies and services budget allows the office to hire contractors, interns, to be able to sponsor events, and have pilot programs on various issues. Currently, we have a great relationship with the Franklin County Soil and Water Conservation District. Through this partnership, we're able to provide water cycle and stormwater education to middle school-aged children. We also partner with The Ohio State University to hire interns for from their environmental and sustainability programs during the summer, and we work on many projects with those interns. The majority of our supplies is to support Green Spot, which is the city's premier educational outreach program. It provides for sustainability. It provides a platform where households, businesses, and community groups can make commitments to conserve and protect water, conserve energy, reduce, reuse, and recycle, support green transportation, and much more. People can register online for this free program by going to columbus.gov/greenspot. Currently, there are more than 20,000 members. We are working to increase this to 22,000 by the year 2021. We will continue to work with businesses in helping them achieve their sustainability goals through our e-dashboard platform, our Green Spot Sustainability course, which many companies partake in this area, as well as our business e-newsletter, which goes out to very many recipients. We will finalize a green home guide, recruit at least one neighborhood to become designated as a Green Spot neighborhood, hold our Green Spotlight Awards celebration, which is an annual celebration, and continue to engage stakeholders on the Green Spot Advisory Board, which is made up of many organizations from the environmental community as well as businesses and neighborhood groups. Our office will continue to grow our Sustainable Columbus program, implement our portion of the American Cities Climate Challenge Grant, and continue to engage residents on Blueprint Columbus. We look forward to another busy year engaging the community and listening to input and taking action to help Columbus to continue to be a sustainability leader in this region and country. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Favor, and members of council. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So I didn't hear you say it. Did you highlight the mark that Green Spot just hit? Did I miss it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We're very pleased to announce, obviously, that Green Spot has hit more than 20,000 members, thanks to the incredible work of Dave Celebrezzi, the Green Spot coordinator, who unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening. But there are high hopes to increase that even more to be able to educate even more residents and businesses about the great things with sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, I did a little video for it yesterday, and I challenge us now to get to 30,000 over the next couple of years. So it's a great program, and certainly one that, hopefully by some neighborhoods adopting it will grow exponentially faster. Last June, council approved a contract to create the Sustainable Columbus Action Plan. Can you talk about the progress on that plan and how any potential implementation is represented in the proposed budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilmember Favor and members of council. Be happy to. This involves funding from 3 different departments: public utilities, which the Office of Sustainability is housed in, public service, and finance. The goal of this project is to create a climate action plan to help the city reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Right now, we have representatives of 9 different departments meeting on a consistent basis. They've met 3 times already. And again, the goal will be to come up with strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and set targets for a community-wide. This funding is for the plan only, and we do anticipate bringing a planned contract modification for council's consideration later in 2020 to help complete this plan. The request is approximately $45,000. Yeah. We anticipate, Mr. Chairman and council members, we anticipate implementation in the year 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Favor, do you have any questions?
Of course. Can you talk about how recycling is actually working in our community? It's fairly new to Columbus in the grand scheme of recycling, and I know that we're still getting accustomed to making sure we're diverting as much as we can from landfills, but are residents really buying into our efforts, the city's efforts, its message to recycle as much as possible? And what, if anything, can we do to improve that rate?
Mr. Chairman, to the council member Favor, thank you for that question. I can talk a little bit about that. I understand that part of that's going to be also covered possibly during the presentation of my colleague from Department of Public Service. But through the Office of Sustainability, we do encourage residents through Green Spot and through our outreach efforts to participate in recycling. The city, again, through the Office of Sustainability, seeks to work to educate members of our residents in our community about not only the benefits of recycling, diverting materials from the landfill, thereby preserving and lengthening the life of the landfill, but then also the types of things that can be recycled at this time. And so, but as far as participation rates and so forth, if I may, Councilmember, Mr. Chairman, defer to my colleague from the Department of Public Service. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
With that, I appreciate your testimony this evening. It's great to have you back in chambers. I will turn the floor over to Assistant Director Wenzel to talk.
Thank you, Chairman Ramey, Councilmember Favor. Thank you for this opportunity to present the highlights of the Department of Public Service's proposed 2020 operating budget, specifically as it relates to refuse collection. First, I'm going to just give a general overview of our department and our budget in total, and then I'll dive down deeper into the refuse collection division itself. So the Department of Public Service is comprised of the Director's Office plus 5 divisions. Of course, refuse collection, parking services, infrastructure management, traffic management, and design and construction. So in 2020, we have a proposed funding level of $138.2 million for the Department of Public Service, which represents roughly around a 16.3% increase over the 2019 operating budget. Most of this increase, or about $15 million worth, is attributed to the city receiving additional gas tax funds associated with Ohio House Bill 62 that passed earlier this year. This will fund 848 full and part-time personnel that provide some of the most core city services, including refuse collection, which contains residential, bulk, and recycling, maintaining and improving our roadways, fixing potholes, and plowing snow, installation and maintenance of traffic signals, signage, pavement markings to promote safety in amongst our citizens, publicly managed parking, and making Columbus safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. So for 2020, the Refuse Collection Division, we have a proposed funding of $37.1 million. This represents roughly 26.8% of our total budget. This also represents a minor increase over the 2019 operating budget of 0.46%. Of that $37.1 million, $17.7 million, or 48% of the total budget is personnel expenses related to refuse collection. $161,900 is for materials and supplies. $19.2 million is for services. This actually also includes $9.2 million for recycling and yard waste contract that we have with Rumpke. It also includes $9.2 million for maintenance of our fleet. We have $52,000 set aside for claims, as well as $10,000 for equipment. So just to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, if you just look at personnel, our recycling contract for yard waste and recycling, of course, and our fleet cost, that amounts to about $36.1 million of our total budget, or 97.3% of the refuse's total budget is all personnel or yard waste contract and maintaining our fleet. So this proposed funding will support 226 full-time personnel that provide trash collection services to more than 340,000 residents every week, 52 weeks a year. Of that 226 full-time personnel, we're going to dedicate 20 people next year to support the Clean Neighborhoods Initiative to address illegal dumping, the persistent problem of illegal dumping in our neighborhoods. This totals about $1.8 million of our total budget. These efforts for illegal dumping include continuing to replace our 300-gallon containers with 96-gallon containers or 90-gallon containers. We're going to increase the crews dedicated to clean up our alleys from 9 drivers to 15 drivers. We're going to continue to utilize installation of cameras and work with the Department of Public Safety to capture and prosecute illegal dumpers. We're going to educate residents on how to assist in stopping illegal dumping in our neighborhoods. So far this year, illegal dumping initiative has been a great success. The refuse collection crews dedicated to pick up and dispose of illegal dump materials have picked up over 5,600 tons of debris, which includes bulk items and tires. Including that number is 50 tons or 5,430 tires that have been illegally dumped in our right-of-way. Also, the Division of Refuse Collection is home of the Keep Columbus Beautiful program, or our KCB program is what we like to call it. Every year, KCB staff of three full-time people work with thousands of volunteers in neighborhoods, businesses, schools, churches, and other community organizations to clean litter from Columbus streets. So far in 2019, the KCB team partnered with 457 volunteer groups for litter abatement and beautification. In total, over 8,400 volunteers contributed over 16,000 hours to pick up almost 308,000 pounds of litter from public right-of-way. They also helped enhance areas with trees, flowers, and removal of weeds and brush. That kind of work with the community will continue at KCB in 2020. Finally, as a part of the budget proposal, we will continue to, with our residential recycling program of more than 201,000 households, apartments, and multifamily complexes. As Councilmember Favor mentioned, we think that the recycling program has been a great success. Since the program started in June of 2012 through September of this year, residents have recycled almost 230,000 tons of materials, saving the city almost $12.5 million in tipping fees at the county landfill. So far this year, year-to-date through September, 23,200 tons of materials has been recycled, saving roughly $1.2 million at tipping fees at the landfill. So that concludes my presentation of the 2020 Department of Public Service proposed operating budget. I would be glad and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, so as we know, SWACO is routinely discussing the need to responsibly manage the landfill in order to preserve space, essentially, what we can do to protect the inevitable of either expanding that current site or building new ones, and the way to do that is diversion. So we've hit close to a 20% diversion rate with our recycling program. Can we talk a little bit more about some of the things that we've done in this past year to help increase that diversion rate and what we're going to be doing in the future?
Absolutely, Chairman Remy, Councilmember Favor. One of the things we did this year was we partnered with SWACO to actually kind of look at some of our opportunities in our neighborhoods on what is actually being recycled. So we actually went out and kind of did an audit. We kind of looked at what's being recycled, and some of the problems that we're running into is contamination, basically. So once that container is contaminated, it no longer is viable for recycling, so it does end up into the county landfill. So as my colleague, Assistant Director Ortega mentioned, it's a lot of education. So getting out there and educating our residents and telling them these are the type of items that go in the recycle bin that can go to our recycling facility and be basically sold on the open market to have those items recycled. So we worked real closely with SWACO to basically kind of develop that plan to move forward to help with some of our recycling opportunities that we have in our neighborhoods. We actually we hired a consultant to help us develop some benchmarking and evaluation tools and metrics to see how we're comparing with other cities throughout the United States. We also evaluated opportunities for expanding the program. As you know, we're looking at possibly going into some of our multifamily complexes and increasing recycling that way, where it's not available currently. We're looking to increase regional collaboration with other cities, with other jurisdictions, to see what they're doing to increase their numbers in recycling, and also kind of to be more efficient and look and see if there's some areas where we can help them pick up some of their recycling in areas that we're into already within City of Columbus limits. And also look at recommending strategies for increasing participation, as well as identifying those strategies to address regional recycling collaboration also. So we just got this report in. We're reviewing it now, and we're actually going to sit down with SWACO within the next few weeks to go over the report, and we'll be happy to share it with council once we do that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note in that pilot, people actually went out container by container, sitting by the side of the road, looking to see what people recycled, and then to help to educate those people, what they did right and what they did wrong. I'll take just a second to note that, when you put plastic bags, for instance, in the recycling containers, this causes extra work in order to eliminate those plastic bags. I suggest that, residents get their groceries in paper bags, utilize those to hold your recycling, and then take those out to the bin. When you put foreign objects such as a butter tub, which are not recyclable, unfortunately, within the city of Columbus and the region, for that matter, because there isn't a buyer of that type of recycling, that actually costs the city more because it goes to the recycling facility, then it's pulled from the stream, and then we have to take it and tip it down at SWACO. So there is a lot of educating that needs to go on as it relates to recycling, but there certainly is a great opportunity to increase the diversion rate, and certainly appreciate all that the department's been doing to work with SWACO to pilot some of these educational opportunities, and certainly to make sure that we're increasing the level of participation within the city. Councilmember Faber?
Yes, so thank you for your presentation and for wrapping that question up for us. As you mentioned, over 90% of the department's budget consists of some type of staffing of some sort, right?
That is correct. So if you looked at just the refuse collection division itself, between staffing and the recycling contract, as well as maintaining our fleet, it's over 90%, yes.
Right. So there's costs associated with hiring employees and versus trying to keep them, for them to stay on. Are there any efforts to address the high turnover rate as it relates to the Department of Refuse?
Sure, Councilmember Faber, Chair Remy. That's always a challenge for us. If you've noticed in the years passing, to look at our turnover rate, it's been higher and it's been increasing, and it's been harder to attract those quality staff members. Luckily, we made some efficiencies within the department where we've been able to divert some of those vacant positions and not needed to fill them, or divert them to our illegal dumping initiative like we did last year, and we're going to propose to do next year. It really goes down to there's a lot of competition out there. If you look at a lot of CDL drivers are in the private market, and some of our competitors, like a Rumpke or like a Waste Management, can offer different incentives that maybe we can't offer at this point in time. If you look at some of the signing bonuses that they're offering right now, I think I've heard of one being like $5,000. I mean, the city doesn't have that opportunity right now to do something like that. Okay. I think where we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck is maybe helping individuals that aren't CDL trained at this point in time, and helping them go through the process to get their CDL license. Okay. And at that point in time, maybe retaining them as a part of a job opportunity at that point in time. And we've had success on an individual basis in the past doing that. So if we can put that on a larger scale next year, I think we'll be pretty successful at that.
And I'd also like to point out that a lot of our residents may not know that the department does hire restored citizens.
Yes, yes, we do. And we've had a lot of great success with that. One of our employees of the year last year was one of those restored citizens also. And we encourage that. We've had great success with that. And at least getting them in even a lower level job and helping them to get to those steps to get a CDL license and get a higher paying job, so.
Chair, with your permission, I'd like to transition to illegal dumping.
Yeah, just let me follow up just real quickly on that particular point. You know, one of the things I think we've discussed within the department is the Department of Public Utilities offers CDL licensing, and so utilizing some of that back and forth, those opportunities to train people. I think it's also interesting to note with the bonuses that those competitors offer, they don't quite offer the salaries and the benefits packages that the city of Columbus offers. And our drivers now, I believe, start over $40,000, so it's not, you know, it's not chump change, for instance. So we will continue to get the word out on that and try to create programs that will offer incentives for them to get their CDL licensing, which can be expensive if they do that on their own. Yeah. So, Chair, Councilmember Faber.
So you did mention the city's efforts to crack down on illegal dumping have increased this year. Can you elaborate for our viewing audience what those efforts actually entail? There have been a lot of reports as of lately about our dumping problem in Columbus. I think it's important to highlight what we're doing at administration level and legally to go after those who refuse to get rid of their items responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of it's educational, and some of it is some of the procedures that we have done in-house itself. So like one of the things I mentioned is replacing some of our 300-gallon containers to 90-gallon. So we've noticed that when we've had these 300-gallon containers in the alleys, it's just a proven ground for people to come and just dump whatever they want around that 300-gallon containers. Where if we have 90-gallon containers for each individual resident, they're bringing them in and bringing them out on each day of service. So it's helped us reduce those efforts to encourage that by changing the way we do some of our processes and procedures. I know our department or Division of Refuse Collection is working closely with the City Attorney's Office, as well as the Public Safety Department and police to apprehend these individuals that are doing this illegal dumping. We do have a number of investments that we made in cameras in the neighborhoods, so we can actually have video evidence. So when we go to a court of law, that we have it on film. So you can't really say I wasn't there, it wasn't me. We have it there. So we've been working closely with both the City Attorney's Office and the Division of Police to basically say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore, and if we do catch you illegal dumping, that you will be prosecuted.
How do we prioritize reports of illegal dumping?
So we utilize the 311 system. So we actually have that we use to track them. So we track everything through 311. We currently have 3 solid waste inspectors. This budget, we're going to add 2 more solid waste, reallocate some positions to add 2 more solid waste inspectors that are going to help us go out and investigate those 311 complaints. And being able to utilize 311 to track these things, we could develop hotspots. So we actually have different mapping tools that we use to see where these occurrences are happening. So we are utilizing that. So pretty much through 311 and through our investigators, how we're going out and investigating that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to note that we also need the cooperation of our friends in the courts.
Absolutely.
3 of our most recent cases of illegal dumping, I believe they were fined $25. And that is absolutely not acceptable unless the courts cooperate in making sure that we are throwing the book at them or using the full extent of the law. We're not going to be able to curb behavior. And so $25 fines are just not acceptable. So we'll continue, that's a part of our roles as council members and elected officials to continue to advocate for stiffer sentences when it comes to this type of crime. But we've got some work to do, apparently. So I want to thank you, Assistant Director Wenzel, for your time and opportunities to share what's going on in the Department of Refuse and Recycling. And we're going to move on to learn more about the Urban Forestry Master Plan. Thank you, Rosalie, for coming down. I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Chair Ramey and Councilmember Favor. Can you hear me? I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about the Urban Forestry Master Plan. Again, my name is Rosalie Hendon, and I'm an environmental planner with Recreation and Parks, and I'm also the project manager for the Urban Forestry Master Plan. To start, I'd like to say that the urban forest, for those who may not be aware, is simply a term for all the trees in Columbus. So that's trees on public property, on private property. Natural systems don't distinguish between property boundaries. So it's the whole thing. And we see in Recreation and Parks and really across the city that the timing is critical to create this kind of long-term plan for Columbus's trees. There's, as you're well aware, there is going to be an influx of new residents over the next several decades, and that it's important to have smart growth in order to plan to have trees that will benefit them and to be able to maintain the tree canopy that we currently have, which I should note, we did an urban tree canopy assessment in 2015, and we found that we're at 22% canopy cover, which is low compared to some other cities. Cincinnati is at 38% and Pittsburgh is at 42%, for example. So that is kind of on the low end. It's not as low as Cleveland. So another reason that we see the Urban Forestry Master Plan is very fitting at this time is that we have the fastest growing urban heat island effect in the country. So the city is much hotter than the rural areas. So you can imagine there's a lot of health impacts there. Heat is very dangerous for health, especially with sensitive populations. So trees can help by cooling the air, and so it's important to equitably distribute trees throughout the city in order to help mitigate the difference in the urban heat versus the surrounding rural area. You can imagine in a park versus on the street, there's a big difference in the actual air temperature. And finally, the quality of life is really where we see trees as impacting our residents. I mentioned the equitable distribution across the city. Beyond the air cooling properties of trees, they're also filtering the air and improving air quality. They're absorbing stormwater, they're reducing energy consumption, and they're making the city more walkable and more vibrant. So we believe all residents should be benefiting from trees. In regards to the Urban Forestry Master Plan, this project has been a year and a half. We've kind of been working internally, and we actually went under contract with 2 consultants in October. So we're just finally kind of getting the gears moving in more of a public space. We have hired 2 consultant teams. It's kind of unusual, but that is because, one, Davie Resource Group is like a national reputable kind of firm. They've done a lot of these master plans in other cities, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Charlotte, North Carolina, many other cities. But 2 of their heavy hitters, lead authors on these plans had actually split from Davie in 2018 and started their own firm in Cincinnati, woman-owned business. And so we thought it's really hard to tell, looking at all the plans, because they both, submitted proposals, what we would get with one or the other, because previously they'd done all their work together. So we decided, with the strengths that Davie Resource Group brought in terms of additional staff, national reputation, data analysis skills, and then Urban Canopy Works with really strong communication skills and writing skills, that we would get the best plan for Columbus if we hired both. And that contract, the total is $205,000, and that's split between the 2 firms and with contingencies. We see this as phase 1 of the Urban Forestry Master Plan, so it's very much a discovery phase. We're looking at the current conditions. We're doing an operations review of our forestry staff and resources. We're looking at codes pertaining to trees, as well as policies. And we're looking at interdepartmental coordination. We're just kind of trying to get a read. Like I mentioned, in 2015, we did the urban tree canopy assessment, so we're not recreating that study, we're using it, but then we're building on it and looking at all these other factors that also impact our trees beyond just where are they physically, if that makes sense. The more the human factors, the management. The other piece of this phase one, beyond the analysis portion, is stakeholder engagement. So I mentioned that CRPD Forestry and Planning, that's kind of the staff team. Then we've built a project team, which is involving a few other key city departments who we see as critical for future implementation of the plan, as well as a few external organizations. So the project team is a mix of internal and external and CRPD, so it's about 25 folks. We're actually kicking off with that team on Thursday of this week. And beyond that, then we'll have this larger advisory group that will engage. The project team will be monthly throughout the course of the project. This advisory group will meet for 3 sequential workshops in the spring. And those there'll be different topics. The first one will be about trees, so it'll be a little presentation and then a feedback session that'll be most of the meeting. The second workshop will be about the players, so the human, what are the human impacts to trees, and then the third will be the management. So we'll also have a public meeting sometime in the spring. We're looking to do one-on-one interviews with key stakeholders, and I am also very interested in going directly to groups if we're not engaging them throughout these other channels and speaking, at a neighborhood association meeting or area commission or however we can reach these different groups. I'm very interested in presenting, getting on their agenda. Like I mentioned, we started in October. We're going through planning to wrap the phase one in August of 2020. We're going to have 2 deliverables coming out of this phase one. The first is the State of the Urban Forest Report. So that's a summary of all these analyses, current conditions. The second deliverable is an action plan, which we are seeing as a 5-year plan for short-term actions that we can take that will really start creating change and improving our management of our urban forest, which is such an asset to the city of Columbus. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this project, and I'll take any questions.
Can you talk a little bit about opportunities that residents might have to provide input on the plan?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chair Remy. Like I mentioned, with our advisory group, we envision reaching out to all the area commissions to invite them to these workshops. I mentioned that I am very interested and open to meeting with neighborhoods, civic associations. If they have a standing meeting, they want to include us on the agenda. We have the public meeting, which will be scheduled sometime in spring of 2020. We also have an area on our website where we'll be posting updates to the process and allow for feedback that way as well.
I know that you have my commitment, obviously, as chair of the Environment Committee, that from an economic development lens, I've talked to the department. We will be talking with new development projects as they come down the pike to make sure that there's every effort to salvage trees and not take them out in anticipation of the project. Somebody brought that to my attention on a project that's coming up, and so we'll be pushing on developers to try to preserve as many trees as possible, because even when they replant them, we know that taking out mature trees for development is detrimental to the environment. So we'll continue to work closely, look forward to the report, and certainly you have our support from our offices up here in council. So, Councilmember Faber.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have a program in Columbus that encourages residents to plant trees?
So we usually do a tree giveaway every fall.
Okay.
And then there are some partner organizations that do something similar. Franklin Soil and Water usually will offer like a rebate for a native plant and tree plantings. And we've also worked with Green Columbus, which is a nonprofit that offers tree giveaways. It's an area that you put your finger on it, Councilmember Favor. When you're talking about the urban forest, 80% of trees are on private property. And so that's where the challenge is that if we want to really impact our overall urban forest, there has to be a private component. And that's something that is always tricky with any city. You know, I actually was just recently at a national conference for partners in community forestry. And it's a challenge trying to figure out how can cities positively impact, you know, the trees on private property. So tree giveaways are one option. There's some really exciting stuff happening in California about nonprofits going kind of door to door. I mean, obviously there's a cost associated with that, but in these areas where, you know, maybe folks need that extra attention and being, you know, kind of educated about why it's good to have a tree rather than just seeing the negatives and the potential liability. Really that one-on-one attention, and then they actually plant, mulch and prune the tree for the first 3 years of its life, and the resident just has to water. So, and that's amazing to me because, you know, we don't do anything on private property because it's such a tricky thing legally. So those kind of partnerships, I think, could be very exciting as an opportunity coming out of this discovery phase to see how we can partner with other organizations and maybe they can be where we are not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm most excited about, just to see what the plan tells us and how we can be proactive to ensure that we're replacing trees and encouraging our residents to be responsible as well to protect our environment. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I, you know, again, want to double down on the commitment. I did have the opportunity to hear some of these programs that you mentioned recently, and would like to make sure that we're pulling out every effort to make sure that we increase the 22% density of our trees and decrease the effect of the urban heat island. That's extremely important as we move forward. And you know, it being a progressive city, we need to have that same commitment as it relates to our tree canopy. So thank you for your presentation. Appreciate you coming down this evening, and certainly look forward to working with you moving forward.
Thank you very much for that commitment, Chairman.
Thank you. Now, last but not least, we will move on to our third and final committee of the evening, Economic Development. And I am pleased to turn the floor over to Interim Director Michael Stevens. Director Stevens, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just need to start off by saying how much I appreciate Rosalie throwing a little shade towards Cleveland. Good evening, Chair Remy and Councilmember Favor. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Department of Development's portion of the 2020 operating budget. The Department of Development's 2020 operating budget is just over $50 million, including all funds. This includes $30 million, or 59% from the general fund, $15 million, or 31% in federal grants, CDBG, Home, ESG, and LEAD, and $5 million, or 10% from other funds, including $330,000 from other departments to support staff who are split funded and collaborate across departments. The department's budget is strategically focused on affordable housing, neighborhoods, and job creation. $22 million, or 48%, will be used to address the community's affordable housing needs. These funds are designed to increase and improve home ownership, provide gap financing to construct new housing stock, and provide affordable rental housing. $21 million, or 39%, will be used to provide services to neighborhoods and residents. These services include social service grants, proactive code enforcement, and much-needed infrastructure projects. $7 million, or 13%, will go to supporting the growth of new jobs, private investment, and entrepreneurship initiatives. Next, I'd like to speak specifically about the general fund. The general fund represents 59% of the department's overall 2020 budget. The budget request for 2020 is approximately $30 million. This is an increase of $2 million over 2019. The additional funds will be used to accomplish two things. First, establish a second proactive code enforcement team. The proactive code enforcement team was originally established in 2014 to identify issues concerning problematic landlords in areas with high concentrations of systematic code issues. All residents of Columbus deserve housing that is safe and compliant with building standards. Through the work of the Code Enforcement Division and the City Attorney's Office, the city works hard every day to ensure the health and safety of our residents while holding landlords accountable. A second proactive code enforcement team gives us the ability to expand this important work within our neighborhoods. Second, the transfer of 23 employees to the general fund. This transfer does not change the number of employees in the department, just their funding source. These staff are currently being paid by federal and/or limited and nearly depleted department funds. This transfer allows us to maximize the use of our federal funds for neighborhood projects by moving payroll costs to the general fund. Economic Development's total budget is $8.5 million. This represents a slight increase as a result of moving some existing staff to the general fund. 25% of the budget will be used for personnel costs, funded by the general fund and from tax incentive fees in the BTI fund. 5% is for operations, and 70% is for supporting community agencies, small business, and CDBG-funded neighborhood construction projects. Our 2019 public-private partnership efforts has leveraged $25.65 in private investment for every $1 of city investment. Our goal is to increase this to $28.22 next year. Columbus's diverse economy and skilled workforce continues to attract new jobs and investment. 2019 has been an excellent year for jobs. This year, Council has approved 36 deals, creating 2,817 jobs and $279 million in private investment. Examples include Williams-Lea, with locations around the world, chose Columbus for its latest expansion. They will invest $6 million and add 550 new full-time positions with wages of $19.23 and above. Chipotle plans to grow their existing corporate presence by investing $4 million and creating 274 jobs with wages of $24 and above. We're also seeing industrial growth on the east side and south side of our city. RM Built-Right specializes in manufacturing and distribution of rubber sheeting, matting, and other products. They plan to invest $11.4 million to renovate industrial space and create 40 new jobs. All of these jobs are paying $15 per hour or greater. Calgon Carbon Corporation specializes in air and water purification products. They plan to invest $7.2 million to renovate and grow by 15 new jobs, paying $21.91 per hour and above. Lastly, the 2020 CDBG budget allows the department to focus its efforts on economic development and neighborhood improvements by addressing both the department's core missions and the city's consolidated plan priorities. We plan to invest $3.7 million to include $1.9 million in funding to improve pedestrian access within the Hilltop, Linden, and Near East neighborhoods. Work includes the construction of new sidewalks to make the area more pedestrian-friendly. The two projects, both scheduled to be completed by December of 2020, will connect residents with critical resources such as a grocery store, pharmacy, and child care within their neighborhoods. $1.5 million in funding for the installation of lighting on Cleveland Avenue between Chittenden and Hudson. The project is the second part of a larger project to improve pedestrian safety by installing approximately 113 light fixtures along the street. The first project will be completed in March of 2020, and the second project is scheduled to be completed by March of 2021. Planning's total budget is $2 million, similar to 2019. 96% of this budget is for personnel and 4% is for operations. Collaboration between development and building and zoning services has resulted in BZS funding one position in the planning division starting in 2020. Planning for future growth can only be effective if it is conducted in partnership with the community. We will continue to initiate innovative techniques for increased community engagement as the city grows. In 2020, planning will launch the Columbus Planning Classroom to engage neighborhoods in planning topics related to the city's future growth. The division will also continue to implement the Columbus-wide planning policies, C2P2, and increase the number of communities with adopted C2P2 design guidelines from 14 to 20. We are also striving to improve our internal processes. In the coming year, we will collaborate with the Department of Technology on new data management platform to improve access and usability of our data to support policy and decision-making. In addition, we will look to foster closer integration with building and zoning services, development review process, and implement a digital application system in order to enhance efficiency and improve customer service. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the leadership team at the Department of Development for their hard work in developing this budget, and I'd like to also thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Stevens. What are some of the resources that are available for residents to look at common terms, acronyms that we throw around so easily down here at City Hall, to review like the incentive and abatement evaluation process prior to approval. Are there some resources that are available to them?
Yeah, I would encourage residents to go to the city's website on our economic development page. We have a detailed listing of the different type of incentives. So when we talk about the JGTI or the JTCs, I can't even get it right, the Job Growth Tax Credit, or our JGI, our Job Growth Incentive, CRA, or Community Reinvestment Areas, it has details of what all of those incentives are and how we utilize those. I can tell you, as a division of economic development, when they recently implemented a new incentive study, we have a scorecard that we use to evaluate the projects. And we're looking at that level of investment that the private, whether it's industry or the developers making, and the resulting jobs that are going to the jobs that will result from that investment. We also look at the wage that's associated with those jobs. Clearly, we're encouraging nothing, we will not incentivize anything below $15 an hour, and we're finding ways to try to encourage as high wage growth as possible.
You mentioned C2P2. Have you found communities that you're going to look to target in 2020 to adopt this citywide planning policy?
So while we have not identified any specific neighborhoods, we continue to engage all the communities on C2P2 and really to encourage the early adoption of that. And we're really going to go kind of like water going to the path of least resistance. We're going to work with those communities that show the greatest interest.
Councilmember Faber?
Thank you, Interim Director Stevens, for your presentation. You mentioned the incentivizing of jobs that are paying $15 or more in our community. We know that there are companies that may have not held up their end of the bargain. Can you discuss what the oversight process is as it relates to incentives?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Faber. We have a tax incentive review council that meets annually in July, and they review all the incentives that have been entered into between the city and the developer or the business. And we require those companies to report the job creation and the wage. And then we make recommendations to the Tax Incentive Review Council on how to best approach those companies that have not met their commitments. We try to give them an opportunity to correct that. We want to see that job growth. We want to see that wage growth. But if they do not, then we bring legislation to City Council to eliminate those incentives and roll them back.
And I know that you just briefly touched on the results of the report this year, just how many jobs were created. Can you, for our viewing audience, give us just those details again?
Sure, I'd be happy to. If you bear with me for a
Sure.
second, I will go back.
Because I think it's important to highlight what the positive incentives can do for our city.
So the city's making a number of strategic investments with these incentives, and so far in 2019, we have had 36 deals approved by City Council, which is estimated to create at least 2,817 jobs and $279 million in private investment. So I'm trying to do some quick math because I don't have in front of me what does that 2,800 jobs equate in income tax revenue on an annual basis, but it's approximately $5 million. Mm-hmm. And that's money that's going into the city's general fund to pay for those city services we've talked about here some tonight, and other city services that our residents have come to expect, whether it's police and fire, whether it's our recreation and park programs, our refuse our disposal, and others.
Okay. Let me keep going.
Please.
Okay. So we often hear that our review process, as it relates to just going through the zoning process or just plan review, could be a little cumbersome for some individuals. Can you elaborate on what the city is going to do moving forward to clean that process up for I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry for cutting you off. Thank you. I appreciate the question. So our Division of Planning specifically in 2020 is implementing process improvements that are going to help us keep up with the demand, maintain customer service, and ensure the high-quality design that our residents have come to expect. But what's really important is we need to balance, as a regulatory body, we need to balance the process of how we maintain those regulations with the customer service and remember it's an approval process, and work with our residents and engage our residents to try to, as quickly as possible, get to an answer that meets the needs of the regulation but also meets our requirements of our residents. So we're always looking at ways to improve our processes. Our new planning administrator, Mark DeVillis, has done a nice job on trying to identify what processes we have in place and how can we improve that, so we're more fully engaging our residents through our different commissions and our plan review.
Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation this evening. I do want to say that I appreciate yourself and the department's willingness to accommodate our values, City Council's values of providing more affordable housing to our residents, making sure that jobs incentives are provided to those people that offer $15 an hour and higher. And we're going to continue to push the department. There isn't a discussion that goes by with any developer that we're not pushing on them for more as we continue to grow. One of the fastest growing city in the Midwest, and certainly with that growth creates complications, and we want to make sure that everybody's succeeding. So we will continue to push the department to make sure that our values are being illustrated in the projects that are being done. And I appreciate the leadership that you provide to cooperate, to make sure that our voice is being heard as well. So if
I may, Councilmember Remy and Chair Remy, I apologize. I think it's really important to emphasize, not only to you, but for the viewing and listening audience, that when we are sitting down and talking about doing one of these 36 incentive deals, we are talking about making sure we're approaching it so we're focused on prosperity for all, and really looking at those public policy priorities around not only job creation, but affordability in the housing, and what opportunities are available to our small and minority and disadvantaged businesses through this investment that these developers and companies are making. So I appreciate the leadership that Council has shown, and continue to challenge us, and we will work with the development community to make sure we have really, truly, we're addressing growth that impacts all our residents positively.
And you hit on a good point. I mean, just yesterday we were talking about community benefit agreements with some of the construction that is going on, making sure that MBEs are represented throughout the process. So we will continue to push on that. We'll continue. I appreciate the partnership, and certainly thank you for the testimony that you've given this evening. There are no speaker slips this evening. So do you have any additional comments or questions?
No, I will just say thank you to each of the departments that presented today. Council Member Remy and I have share a couple of committees that are they're intertwined. So it's important for me as Chair of Housing and Public Service to be as actively engaged with both of those departments. And if anyone says housing, I'm perking up. So I think that we have been very clear about what our priorities are for 2020, and we appreciate each and every one of your efforts in helping to move that vision forward. So thank you.
I certainly appreciate Councilmember Favor's partnership, and certainly the collaborative work that we do entertain together. I do believe we do have one speaker. I'll make sure that you have the opportunity to speak. It's Diane Nance from the Columbus Art Commission. If you would please come up and state your name and the organization that you represent. And you have 3 minutes of testimony.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief.
All right.
I appreciate this opportunity, Chair Remy and Councilmember Favor. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of all the commissioners, the commission, the Columbus Art Commission. I'm Diane Nance, I'm the chair of the commission. We all wish to thank you first for all the support you've given us over the years. That's been incredible. And funding of the city's public art program in the Development Department, Planning Division. I'm going to read.
That's fine.
Care and maintenance of the city's growing outdoor public art collection is part of our cultural history. These cultural assets currently number approximately 42 pieces, the maintenance of which has become the responsibility of the public art program, and for which annual maintenance funds are required. And thank you for supporting it and appropriating operating funds annually for these tasks. Costs will increase as the collection increases. Some artworks require periodic maintenance, and other works require biannual and annual maintenance for protection and preservation. We ask you to consider funding a citywide public art master plan. If not this year, then in 2021 operating budget. We are a large city, and as such, we recognize this is not an inexpensive request. However, an interactive public art master plan will grow the public art program in a meaningful and equitable manner. Currently, the program has had to look for public art opportunities without the guidance of a plan, which would provide, and it provides sporadic public art funding. This approach has prevented the program from growing and reaching more neighborhoods and employing local artists. Again, thank you for the opportunity to address you. We look forward to returning and requesting that the $250,000 in annual public art funding stipulated in Executive Order 2014-01 be restored as funds are available and increased. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Nance. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from you this evening as a member of the GCAC board and certainly someone that's very interested in public art and how it helps to define the city of Columbus. Be very interested in talking with you and working on ways to restore that and also developing a master plan. So thank you very much. We appreciate you coming down this evening. Seeing no other speakers this evening, I'd like to thank everyone for their testimony. It certainly was a pleasure to hear from Directors Nicole Brandon, Amy DeLong, Assistant Directors Jeff Ortega and Steve Winsel, Interim Director Michael Stevens, Rosalie Hendon for being here and providing your presentations tonight. I thank you. This will conclude tonight's hearing on the proposed 2020 operating budget for the Administration, Environment, and Economic Development Committees. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you very much.